What if everything you've called reality is only a fraction of what's actually there? Not because the world is an illusion, but because your mind has been quietly editing it since the day you were born. At this very moment, countless sounds go unheard, thousands of details pass unnoticed, entire possibilities remain invisible, not because they don't exist, but because your brain has decided they're not important. Now imagine this. If your mind is constantly filtering reality, how can you ever know whether you're seeing the world as it is or simply as you've learned to see it? That question has fascinated philosophers, psychologists, and mystics for centuries. And once you begin exploring it, you may never look at your life in quite the same way again. Every second, your senses receive an astonishing amount of information, far more than you could ever consciously process. If your brain attempted to analyze every sound, color, movement, memory, and sensation at once, everyday life would become overwhelming. So it does something remarkable. It filters, it predicts, it fills in missing pieces. In neuroscience, this idea is reflected in models of perception, suggesting that the brain doesn't merely record reality like a camera. Instead, it actively interprets incoming information, combining sensory input with prior experience to create our conscious experience of the world. This process is incredibly efficient, but efficiency comes with a hidden trade-off. What we experience isn't raw reality. It's reality as interpreted through the lens of our minds. Think about reading a familiar sentence with a missing word. Your brain often supplies the missing piece before you even notice the gap. Or consider how easily optical illusions can fool us. The eyes aren't necessarily failing. The brain is making its best prediction. Most of the time, those predictions help us. Sometimes, they quietly limit us. Carl Jung believed that we don't simply observe reality. We approach it carrying an invisible collection of memories, fears, desires, and unconscious assumptions. These hidden patterns shape not only what we notice, but also what we ignore. Imagine two people entering the same room. One immediately notices who seems to dislike them. The other notices who smiles warmly. Neither is lying. Both are observing something real. Yet each leaves with a completely different impression of the same event. Reality hasn't changed. Attention has. Modern psychology supports parts of this idea. Research on selective attention and confirmation bias suggests that we naturally notice information consistent with our existing beliefs, while often overlooking evidence that challenges them. If someone believes the world is hostile, their attention may become highly sensitive to signs of threat. If another believes people are generally trustworthy, they may notice kindness that others miss. This doesn't mean beliefs magically create external reality. It means they influence the reality we experience, perhaps more than we realize. This may explain why changing circumstances doesn't always change our lives. Someone moves to another city, yet carries the same loneliness. Another finds a better job, yet feels the same insecurity. A relationship ends, a new one begins. Months later, the emotional pattern returns. Different people, different places, the same story. Why? Because changing the scenery isn't always the same as changing the lens. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus suggested that people are troubled less by events themselves than by the judgments they make about them. It's a simple statement, but it points towards something profound. Between every experience and every emotional reaction, there is interpretation. Most of that interpretation happens so quickly that it feels invisible. A delayed text becomes rejection. Constructive criticism becomes failure. Silence becomes disapproval. Notice what happens. An event occurs, the mind assigns meaning. The body responds as though that meaning were objective reality. And before long, we've forgotten there was ever another way to interpret what happened. Alan Watts often explored a related idea. He suggested that many of our struggles arise because we mistake our mental models for reality itself. It's a little like confusing a map with the landscape. Maps are useful. Without them, we'd constantly feel lost. But no map can capture every tree, every river, every changing cloud. The moment we forget that, the map becomes a prison. Our beliefs work much the same way. Some beliefs guide us wisely. Others quietly narrow the world. I'm not creative. People always leave. I'll never change. These don't always feel like beliefs. They feel like facts. Yet if we examine them closely, many originated years earlier under circumstances that no longer exist. Perhaps one teacher criticized your work. Perhaps one relationship ended painfully. Perhaps one failure became an identity. The event passed, the conclusion remained. Years later, that conclusion continues filtering every new experience. Marcus Aurelius repeatedly reminded himself to question appearances before accepting them. Not because appearances are always false, but because first impressions are often incomplete. This habit of questioning may be one of the greatest forms of freedom available to us. Not freedom from reality, freedom from assuming we've already understood it. Eckhart Tolle approaches this from another angle. He encourages observing thoughts instead of immediately identifying with them. There's an important distinction here. Having the thought, "I'm a failure," isn't the same as discovering an objective truth. It's an experience occurring within awareness. The moment we notice that difference, something shifts. The thought loses a little of its authority. Curiosity replaces certainty, and curiosity has an extraordinary quality. It expands perception. Consider how children experience the world. They ask endless questions. They notice details adults walk past every day. A puddle becomes an ocean. A leaf becomes a mystery. Nothing is ordinary because almost nothing is assumed. As we grow older, experience makes life more manageable, but it also makes life more predictable. Eventually, we stop seeing. We start recognizing. Recognition is useful, yet it comes with a cost. The familiar often hides the extraordinary. A daily walk becomes invisible. A loved one's presence becomes expected. Even our own thoughts become so repetitive that we mistake them for our identity. Perhaps seeing reality differently doesn't always require discovering something new. Perhaps it begins by noticing what has been there all along. This idea appears in many philosophical traditions. Some contemplative practices encourage observing experience without immediately labeling it. Certain existential thinkers emphasize that meaning is not always found. It is often created through the choices we make. Meanwhile, thinkers like Neville Goddard propose that inner assumptions play a creative role in shaping life. Whether one accepts his metaphysical conclusions or interprets them symbolically, his work highlights an important psychological insight. Expectations can influence attention, behavior, and the opportunities we recognize. Different traditions arrive at different conclusions, but many begin with the same invitation: become aware of the lens. In everyday life, this can be surprisingly practical. Imagine receiving criticism at work. Your automatic reaction might be defensiveness. But what happens if you pause? What story is your mind telling? That you're being attacked, or that you're being given information that could help you grow? The external event hasn't changed, only the interpretation has. Or consider meeting someone new. If you assume they'll dislike you, your body becomes tense. Your conversation becomes guarded. Ironically, that very behavior can make connection more difficult. The belief quietly helps produce the outcome it feared. Psychologists sometimes describe these patterns as self-fulfilling prophecies, not because thoughts possess mystical power, but because beliefs influence actions, and actions influence results. Awareness interrupts the cycle. Not instantly, not perfectly, but consistently. The more often we notice our interpretations, the less completely they control us. Perhaps this is what genuine transformation looks like. Not waking up as a different person, not escaping reality, but gradually seeing more of it. More possibilities, more perspectives, more of ourselves. The world outside may remain exactly the same, yet the world within begins to change. And from that change, entirely new choices become visible. The philosopher Seneca once observed that we suffer more often in imagination than in reality. Whether or not that applies to every situation, it reminds us of something essential. The mind is a powerful storyteller. Sometimes its stories protect us, sometimes they imprison us. Wisdom may begin not when we stop thinking, but when we realize we are more than every thought that passes through us. So perhaps the most important shift isn't seeing a different world. It's realizing that the world you've always known has never been the complete picture. And if that's true, then the next version of your life may not begin with changing your circumstances. It may begin with changing the question you ask each time you experience them. Instead of asking, "Is this reality?" perhaps ask, "How much of what I'm seeing belongs to the world, and how much belongs to the lens through which I'm looking?"